Okay, so this is our second session, and last time. So I'll start off by saying, any questions about last time? Any question, comments, concerns?
And I have a general question real quick.
Sure.
We had heard we're with you for the next 3 Thursdays, but we're really not meeting next Thursday, right?
My schedule, the way it printed, I guess the next time, the next Thursday that you guys meet is January 6th.
Yeah, that's what I just want to make sure of. Okay.
And
Oh, I didn't know that. Thanks, Gretchen.
That's what our manual says, and yeah.
Okay.
But somebody had said the next 3 Thursdays, so I guess it's technically the next 3 Thursdays we meet and not the next 3 chronological Thursdays.
Cool.
Yeah, because so like I said, according to my schedule, it's goofy because of the way it printed. It cut it off for the January 6th date. Kate again is teaching class, and then following up with just the same. The title is Anatomy of Pelvis and Abdominals. So there will be I gotta get caught up on the handouts. So there'll probably be another one. So I jump around, but I also, there is some consistency. There is some rhyme or reason to what I'm doing, but I don't know. That was my question to people, is how they are using the technology, or do you, when there's a handout, do you print them out so that you have a paper copy, or do you just go into the computer and look at it? How does it work?
I like paper, always have.
Me too.
Okay, so if you do that, I do the paper, and so if you can make sure you have every handout available with you whenever we're meeting. Okay. Also the Ray Long book and the Mastering the Basics book, if you could have those as well handy, because I just like I said, I jump around and say, well, here's an example of this, and I can just grab those. I'm not to the point where I've scanned things, have it on my computer, and do a screen share. I apologize, but you have all the same. Anything I'll be using, most of it, anything that's relevant, you will have, whether it's in the books or the handouts. So the book that you do not have, that I have, is I gave a handout. That's the first page, is this life thing. So the book is actually, this is the book, and this is the relevant pages. And this is that book that the instructor, this is the manual that Lynn had to use back in the 80s. And anatomy hasn't changed much. And so for copyright reasons, I use that. And it's a nice collection of what you need to know. And actually, it's actually more than you need to know, but the more you know, the better. So if we take a quick look at this life instructor's manual, I'm going to jump in several pages here. On the bottom are the page numbers: 19, 20, 21, 22. Let's see here. Page 24. 24 and 25, where they have the muscles. So if you have that handy, this is what I'm looking at on page 24. It's the muscles, and they're identified. So remember, I'm trying to keep this interesting, and I'm trying to throw out tidbits of information so that you apply it and use it. But to really know, you have to repeatedly go and teach yourself repetitively to know the muscles. So we'll go through some of these, just their general location. I won't go through the origin and insertion, but we'll just highlight some of the big ones that you really should know. So on the left side, as you're looking at the individual the muscular guy, muscular person, I should say. It's their right side, it's the left side of the page, working our way down the trapezius muscle.
I know one. Woo-hoo.
So we have a winner. It sounds familiar. So if you, this individual, it's on their right side. So if you take your left hand and put it up here between your shoulder and your neck on this part here, that in general is your trapezius muscle. And so we're going to leave it at that for now because that's the way it's identified here. But that is technically the upper trapezius muscle. And so, yeah, well, so if you put that there, that's your trapezius. It goes roughly from the head and neck to the shoulder and collarbone, shoulder meaning the scapula bone. And so that's a common one that really you should know what it is. The next one down that you should know, and it's literally the next one on the list, is the pectoralis major. So again, take your left hand and put it just underneath your collarbone, and that is the pectoralis major muscle. Next one down is the latissimus dorsi. This one's a little bit more difficult because it's really not a bulky muscle. It's more of a sheet, a flat sheet muscle. Unless you work out quite a bit, it's the one that will give the bodybuilders that V shape. And so if you, yeah, Tracy's doing it right there. If you take your left hand and put it, slide it up and down here, that's the, and you're reaching back with your fingertips. Back through there. So if you have the flexibility and you can bring your fingertips up onto your shoulder blade, it's actually crossing over the shoulder blade. It's not attached to it, but it does attach to the upper arm, which is the humerus, and it also attaches from T6 down. We talked about the thoracic last time, so you should have an idea where that is.
Todd, I'm sorry, which one was that again?
The latissimus dorsi.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So that's abbreviated a lot of times. It's just the lats, and same thing with the upper with the traps. The trapezius is thought of as, you know, just quickly, just it's the traps. So the next one is the serratus anterior muscle. And again, if you look at the weightlifters looks like the guy here. And there's a little difference there. It almost looks like a rib, like a series of ribs. But if you look at it, it's different, and that's the serratus. The serratus is tricky. It is, I'll refer to this area here with the shoulder blade and the ribs, that it's a sandwich. And the sandwich, the meat of the sandwich is the different muscles that are in there. And so the serratus is one of the meats that's in that sandwich. The bones would be the bread, the shoulder blade, the front of the shoulder blade, and the ribs. And between the shoulder blade and the rib is a series of muscles, one of which is the serratus anterior.
When we were just doing this, and you said that's our latissimus dorsi,
Mm-hmm.
that seems like that's the deltoid.
Take your hand instead of off of where you have it, and take your left hand on your right shoulder right here. Yeah, that's the deltoids.
The back.
There's 3 parts to it. There's a
Okay.
front, a middle, and the back. So it's the anterior delt, the middle delts, and the posterior delts. So those,
Yeah, on page 25, it just looks a lot lower than where we were holding it. It looks like it's like at your ribs. You see that? The back.
Yeah.
On page 25.
Yeah. If you, that's on the individual, on the backside, that's on the individual's left side. And,
Yeah.
and what happens in anatomy is they will distort things just enough so they can show you other things.
Oh,
So if you look on the right side of that page 25 you're talking about, opposite of the latissimus dorsi, you can find the latissimus dorsi on the individual's right side as well. Correct? It's not labeled, but
right,
but you can see it.
yeah,
And just above it, they have labeled the teres minor and the teres major. Correct? You see that?
Yep.
Well, you can't see those typically because the lat is over top of it. But they drew it this way just so you can
they can put it out, but it's underneath.
yeah, so without cutting out that lat, they can they drew it this way.
Okay,
Does that make sense?
I just, yeah, I feel like I'm confusing people, but I was just,
No, it helps clarify for other people, and so keep asking questions. So that teres major and minor, if you raise your elbow up so your arm is horizontal, your upper arm, your humerus, and you put your fingertips this time on that outer edge of your shoulder blade, and you roll them forward in this big hunk of thickness of muscle, that's where there's the teres minor, the teres major, and the lats. Okay. So if I go back, the lat is through here, and it's over top of most of that teres major and minor. Anybody else confused?
No, that makes sense.
All right. I'm just curious, where'd that come from?
out there, outside.
Okay, because I didn't know if it was on someone's phone. It was just really loud for,
That was
Yeah,
a
it was.
horn.
yeah.
We hear it all the time.
Oh, yeah. When we took yoga down on the south side and there was no air conditioning, and so the windows were open, we would hear all the traffic, and
Yeah,
it just blends into the background after a while. So going back to page 24.
wait, can I ask another question real quick?
Sure.
Just because when you said the trapezius, it was the upper trapezius, is there a lower?
Yeah, there's an upper, middle, and lower trap. But here, for simplicity's sake, they just identify it as the trap. So once again, if you go to page 25, so instead of jumping back and forth, it was going to be a review. So it's on page 24, here's the traps. And then when we get to the next page, it's like, well, here's a review of the trap. You can see it from behind, and you can see if you follow it down along the spine, that little the angle in there, those are the middle traps and the lower traps.
They're not pointed out though, right?
Correct, they're not.
Okay.
And that's why I started with this to keep things simple. So if you can put a little check mark or something by the ones we're noting. Okay. And so as as I say in learning this stuff, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. So if you want to jump to those other books now while you can, but we'll do that again later. So
Okay.
so if it's helping you now, go ahead and do it. But where my intention is at some point in the future, we'll grab the Ray Long book and look for and go through some of these. Okay, so like I said, it's repetition, repetition, repetition. So instead of just me throwing this at you and say, learn all of these, I'm just highlighting right now all the major ones that's you should have some knowledge of.
And is there a pectoralis minor?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're, and this is what we said in PT school. If there's a major, there's probably a minor.
Well, I figured, I'm looking and I'm like, where are they? But I won't get ahead anymore right here, right now.
No, that's fine. Curious minds want to know, so keep asking. I have a question. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is it any different or worse than last time? Because I'm in a different place in the house. I'm in a room versus last time I was in a,
I feel like it's a little easier to focus on you this time.
Yeah.
okay. Yeah.
You're
That's
close
fine.
here.
What's that?
You're closed in. We don't
Yes,
see
yeah.
you free in the background.
Exactly. The next one we're going to point out here is the, well, okay, let me jump back to that. Serratus anterior was the last one I pointed out. That one's important for stability for your plank position, your push-up position, your chaturangas, your lowering. That's an important one for shoulder stabilization. The next one that we'll point out is the rectus abdominis. That's what I was referring to last time as the six-pack muscle. And Tracy said that it's all part of the eight-pack, so to speak. Because the other two, which anatomically aren't physically related, they're functionally related, are the psoas muscles, which we'll get to that in a minute. So the rectus abdominis, that's your six-pack muscle. Part of your let's see, since the printing is on the left side of the page, we'll do the internal oblique. So that's the deeper layered muscle for the abdominals. So if I push in, I'll encounter the external obliques first. If I could cut and go through that, the next would be the internal obliques. And if I could cut that, the next thing I would touch would be the transversus abdominis. And then if I could cut that, then I would be in the gut, the abdominal cavity. I'd be in where your organs are. So I'll take 3 fingers like this and I'll put them horizontal. And so I'll say, when I'm pushing in, the first one's that external oblique because it's the outside one. Then the next one's that internal oblique, and then that innermost one is the transversus abdominis. And as I pointed out last time, the transversus abdominis is important because it's an important muscle for exhalation when you're forcing an exhalation. If you think of it, if you would cough or sneeze or laugh, your belly, your abdominals, all those muscles I just mentioned should draw in because you're forcibly exhaling with a laughing or a coughing. And it's amazing how many of us, we do it backwards. We actually push out. And so that's an indication that you're not using your core automatically as it's designed to use. So, the next one down. Yeah, we'll throw in this tensor fascia lata. That's shortened up as TFL. And that's that's a smaller hip muscle on the front of the hip. And it's interesting where normally you have the muscle attaching from one bone to the next by way of tendons. This one goes from the bone of the pelvis and has its tendon, and then the muscle belly, and then it attaches to the next thing on the list here, which is the iliotibial band, that next thing listed. So instead of inserting into bone, it inserts into the iliotibial band, the IT band. And you'll get a lot of people with issues with the IT band, IT band syndrome, or any variations of pain with that. So the next one is the rectus femoris, and that's the part of the quads. So the front of your thigh, a lot of people are familiar with the front of the thigh as being your quad muscles, versus the back of your thigh is the hamstrings. So the quad literally means four. So there's four components, and the rectus femoris is one of those four components of the quad muscle.
Femoris for femur.
What's that?
Femoris, is that what you're saying? I don't have the guide, so I'm just listening.
Okay,
Femoris
yeah,
for femur.
yeah, we
Okay.
rectus femoris, and so femoris is in reference to the being over the femur.
The femur. Okay, got it.
The next on the list is another one of the quad muscles. It's the vastus lateralis. And so, just like we were saying before, if there's a major, there must be a minor. Well, in this case, there's a vastus lateralis. So there's also a vastus medialis. And you'll see that on the right side of the page, the next to last one down. That too is a quad muscle.
Those stick out for like people who are awesome cyclists, I think.
Yeah,
right?
that's where you'll see that. Yeah.
That
yeah.
used to be me. I remember that.
Actually, all of ours should be better formed, but our body has tendencies, and one of the tendencies is to not use the vastus medialis like we're supposed to, and so it ends up giving you knee tracking problems for the kneecap. And so,
Oh, that's what's going on.
yeah.
Oh.
So the body has a tendency to, when it is trying to conserve energy, or it just gets fatigued, or it's developing problems, the pattern is to overuse the outer muscles, such as the vastus lateralis, and not use the vastus medialis. And then therefore the kneecap isn't going to go straight up and down anymore. It's going to be pulled out to the side. And because it's not tracking in the bony part of the femur like it should, then that's when people will develop patellofemoral syndrome or kneecap problems.
Are those like root words or have different word meanings, lateralis and medialis? It's like one inner, outer, or something like that?
Yeah, lateralis is refers to in the body, it would be the further out versus medial is more towards the midline.
Ooh, there's a hint.
Yeah. Yes. Next on the list on that side is the gracilis. So that's an inner thigh muscle.
Not one of the quads.
It is not, no. It is actually part of the adductor group. And so add means to bring towards the midline. So if I hold my arm up like this, my elbow's the knee coming, if you're out to the side, then when your knee comes in, then that's adduction. So if I would stand and do it, if my knee is out to the side, then I bring it in towards the midline, that I'm using my adductor muscles. It's bringing towards the midline. Yeah, exactly. When you're at the gym, there's the two machines. You can set the same, they'll either have two separate machines, or they'll have the machine so that you can set it so that you're working when you're squeezing in, and that's you're using your adductors, or you can set it so that when you're pushing out, you're abducting. That muscle group is the hip abductors. And the idea, the little hint there is abduction. If you would be kidnapped, you would be abducted, you would be taken away. So your abduction, you're going away from the midline. So that gracilis is part of the
He's just saying-
adductor group.
Yeah.
You said it's part of the abductor, right?
AD as in dog.
Got it. Thank you.
Mhm. Next down would be your, that we're going to pay attention to is the tibialis anterior. So directions of the body. So we went over lateral and medial, right? So if there's directional, there's anterior and posterior. So anterior would be the front part of the body, and the posterior is the back side of the body.
That's a review from last week.
Yes, yes, nothing but a review. So then, yeah, so we'll move on to the next side. And we'll pay attention to the masseter muscle, that third one down. And as my buddy in PT school like to say, it's a muscle of mastication. You make, just sometimes it doesn't take much to amuse yourself. So it's a mastication is the jaw movement. It's chewing food. It's to bring the jaw together. So that's the masseter muscle. Next, we're going to pay attention to is the sternocleidomastoid. So if you look for an O in a word, you don't know how, I don't know how many, everybody usually has to take foreign language in high school. So at least everybody should have some exposure to that. And so Latin and Greek and other things, frequently O is a connecting letter. So you actually have three different things here so that they could descriptively name this. Sternocleidomastoid is referring to the sternum. That's the breastbone. Clyde is referring to the collarbone. And mastoid is near the jaw. It's the bone that sticks out below and under your ear. So instead of saying sternocleidomastoid all the time, we shorten that up to the SCM.
What's the second one? The sternum, collarbone.
And this jaw area is.
Yeah. Yes.
The SCM.
Yes. Sterno S, Clydo C, M, mastoid. And then next is the deltoid muscle. That's one we pointed out earlier, shoulder muscle. And once again, for simplicity's sake, they didn't break it up into the three parts: the anterior deltoid, the middle deltoid, and the posterior deltoid.
Going back to the SCM,
Yes.
so the muscle then connects to all three of those bones? Is that what this muscle is?
Yeah. So if you turn your, let's see how you want to do this. Turn one direction. So if I turn my head to the right and I take my right fingers and I feel along the side here, there's some of the muscle coming down at an angle. That's the SCM. So it has the top end of it is on the mastoid process of the skull. The lower part has two heads to it. One goes to the sternum and the other one goes to the clavicle, the collarbone. Okay. That's it. Just keep asking questions. Next is the triceps brachii. And I'm not saying definitively how things are pronounced, but this is what I learned, and it's common to refer. It's so oftentimes, or most of the time, triceps brachii is just shortened up to triceps. If you raise your arm overhead and touch the back side of your arm here, that's your triceps.
Bingo.
It's when you wave your arm, you don't want it waving back.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, it's your chicken wings.
Yeah.
It's that part that flops around on the bingo arms.
Yes, that's what we said, old lady bingo flap.
That's
Oh, yeah. Bingo, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
no.
So that's tricep.
Exactly.
Sometimes I'm just too curious and I have to ask what I missed there.
Tracy said we were mean, and I said, no, we're just talking about ourselves.
With the flappy bingo.
Sorry, I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about just.
Okay, so moving right along. So, well, before I move to the next one, triceps means 3. So there's 3 parts to it. So we'll just leave it at that for now. So then that was on the back side of the humerus. So if you go to the front side of the humerus, that's the next one down. That's the biceps. And that's 2, because there's 2 main parts to that. That's the one that when you want to show how strong you are, you'll make a muscle. That's your biceps.
Welcome to the gun show.
Yeah, which way to the beach?
Sorry.
That's funny. You can act like they're all new jokes with you. Deep.
I know,
That's
great,
great.
amazing. You've never heard of these silly Americanisms, right? Like these dumb things we say.
Some of these are good to know, but we'll, for simplicity's sake, we'll just skip them. Like I said, this is pretty basic. If you want to take some effort to learn some of these on your own, that's good. But I'm just trying to hit like the bigger ones that you hear more frequently. Bigger meaning more popular.
So the 4 quad muscles, rectus, femoris, vastus, medalis, and
Vastus lataris. We didn't get the 4th one.
yeah, we didn't get to the vastus lataris.
The gracilis, right?
I
Yeah.
thought it was gracilis, but that's I'm not sure. The
Yeah,
gracilis isn't.
I'm drawing a brain fart, but basically it's a vastus intermedialis. So it's intermediate. It's in between.
Is that not on? here?
It's not listed on there.
All right, well, that's unfortunate.
I know.
Yeah,
There's
like
4 of
that's
them.
Maybe they hadn't discovered it in
Why don't we need
1986.
3 in 1986?
Quad is evolved to 4. Nothing. You don't need to worry about it.
It's not helpful.
It's not helpful.
And when
So,
you
yeah,
talk about the deltoids and you said there's the anterior, the blah, and the posterior.
Middle, anterior. So from the side, when you're looking at me, I have a front, which is anterior.
Yeah,
I have the back, which is the posterior.
Yeah.
And then between that is the middle.
it's just called the middle.
Yes.
We should name more things like this.
That should be called intermedialis as well.
That's right. That's what made me ask. I was like, this must be the intermedialis of the deltoid, but no, the rules don't. A different person named that part of the body.
Yeah. And sometimes you need to know because they actually do different things. So
It's my birthday. Are you kidding? Oh my God! Happy birthday! I'm also gonna be here for my birthday too, Christine.
So what's interesting about the deltoids is the reason why they just don't call it the deltoids is because you use a different one for different motions. So if I bring my elbow forward, I'm using the anterior deltoid. Likewise, going back, I'm using my posterior deltoid. if I am abducting out to the side in this manner, because remember I'm going away from the midline, then I'm using my middle deltoid primarily. So that's one of the reasons why you want to point those type of, the distinction of those. And then, so I'll mention this, and I'll try to repeat this because this is an important point. I try to look at this stuff more functionally, and point out those type of things rather than just this origin and insertion, and blah blah blah, is because also the humerus, the anterior and posterior deltoids play roles in a motion we call rotation. So if I'm turning my head, my neck is rotating, versus if I bend it over, I'm side bending. Okay, so my elbow, if I bend it it's easier for you to see this rather than keep my hand down. If I'm bent like this, if I'm turning my shoulder so that my upper arm bone, the humerus, turns in this manner, then that's what we call external rotation. And if I bring it in this way, this is internal rotation. When you raise your arm up and you get before and after this 90 degrees point, you have to be able to externally rotate your humerus so that the bones get out of the way and you can come up higher. That's why if you try to wave your bingo arms like this while you're still internally rotated, then you can only go so far. But if I turn this way, I externally rotate, then I can raise up higher. Okay, so this is more functional stuff that we'll get into later, but the more I repeat myself, especially for these important things, the better.
Well, that was an easy, important thing.
Well,
That was an
This is
easy
the only
one.
thing I understood.
Yeah.
That's that, no questions. He's trying to write down everything. Location is important.
well, I guess I should clarify what I consider important to know for anatomy. You guys could consider what's important to know for the test.
Right, which would be what?
And so I'll try to make that clear when
Okay.
So real quick, if there's rotation and there's bending, there's also flexion, because we talked about that, and there's flexion and what
Flexion and
else?
extension.
Extension, and then are there any more?
Oh yeah, there's yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Well-
No, we'll stop there. Okay.
Yeah, I haven't done this in the past with people with groups, and I relied too much on people self-teaching this part of it, and so I changed it up with you guys because I think other people in the past who didn't pay attention to anatomy and on their own, it doesn't look, on one hand, it doesn't look good if you say, oh yeah, I had yoga anatomy and Todd taught me, and then you have no clue on what the biceps are.
Right.
And so it's just like, I'm trying to squeeze this in so that it's still on you to learn and know it, but I at least as a group went through muscles saying, these are the bigger, most common, like I said before, bigger meaning more common muscles that you should try to get to know a little more.
And I think it makes sense, Todd, like to know the big ones, even though we know there are other little ones underneath them or beside them, because when I would think teaching yoga, you're gonna say, use your triceps to hold you up or whatever it might be. You're not gonna, whatever little muscles behind it or underneath it or whatever, you're not gonna mention those because people are gonna have no clue what you're talking about. Right?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. But you'd be surprised at how much people can learn anatomy from you. And once again, I use Lynn as an example because she takes an interest in this and really loves all this stuff. And she and I both believe that if you use the medical model for referring to the body, then if everybody does that, then we're all communicating with each other and we know what we're talking about.
Right.
And so, if you go around saying, raise your chicken wings up, and that
Well,
works.
yeah, no, that's what I mean, like, yeah, we're gonna use the medical terminology, but the big muscle groups are the ones that people are gonna understand and we can relate
Yeah.
to them, right, when you're in a
Yeah.
pose.
Yeah.
Like deltoids, triceps, I feel like most people at least know or have heard of those words before,
Yeah,
right?
Yep. yeah,
Yeah, I agree. And I was gonna say, I think it's helpful when you're kind of pointing out like which muscles we might use or
Mhm.
think about when we're doing certain postures.
Yeah.
Because I think that will help too, as we're, learning all of this and practicing it and figuring out how we're gonna teach it to remember. So thank you. I think that's helpful.
Mhm.
yeah, I agree. So I'm glad glad you're on the same page. Also too, like an expert in anything, they have, they're referring, they know more than what they're conveying to you. And so the same thing when you're with your teaching is you might be saying this or that, but you'll have a deeper understanding of the mechanics of what's going on. And that's it's not that you're teaching them everything you know, it's just that your knowledge base is deeper. Also too, if you're reading or watching a video and they're making reference on how to do a pose or a movement, then and they're using these terms, then you can catch it and say, or it'll be quicker and easier to understand what they're trying to say.
Also,
Yeah, one of the things I'll run into is when they'll say something like raise your arm. Well, it's just like, well, do you want me to go forward with my arms, or you want me to go out to the side? And you don't have to know the anatomy. You don't have to say flex or abduct, but you can say raise your arms forward out in front of you, flexing your shoulders, where you're throwing it in there to reinforce what you know, but you're also reinforcing with them that there's a difference in the movements in which way they're moving.
Also, Todd, this will help because I hurt my shoulder as well. So now I know exactly what muscle to use. And
Yeah.
to I'm struggling with the pinched nerve and shoulder.
Okay. Yeah.
Big, strong, following videos on YouTube.
Yeah.
Oh, is that how you did it?
Long. Now it's triggered.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm not able to hear everything you're saying. So
No, because I followed all these videos on YouTube and I hurt my shoulder.
okay.
So now it makes sense about talking about anatomy and trying to understand.
Yes. Yeah.
how to use it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The shoulders. You really have to know what you're doing, because you can get away with doing poor form for a while, and then it'll catch up to you.
Yeah, that's what happened with me.
Yeah. And so like I said, the body has a tendency to move certain ways. So if you fall into that trap of moving a certain way, then you end up straining, and you might not immediately have pain, but you keep doing it that way, and then you do damage and pain. And so as I like to say, people will then say, I did yoga, but then the yoga hurt me. It's like, well, no, it was probably the way you did it, or the way your body's you used your body. And so, so is your shoulder all better now?
No, it's I'm in a lot of pain. I have a pinched nerve. That's my chiropractor actually asked me to go ahead and practice. He said, no, just do whatever you're doing, with the neck and shoulder.
Yeah.
So I don't know why I said that, but it's very painful to do chaturanga.
Yeah. Well, then you should be modifying, so it's not painful.
Okay, and then I have to wait until it goes away.
I'm sorry, say that again. Go do what?
Should I wait until it completely goes away?
No, if you can modify it so you have much less pain or no pain. So instead of doing a full chaturanga, you would drop to your knees.
Oh, okay.
And then you wouldn't lower yourself all the way down. You would just go part way down. And because you can probably be okay until you start to go down to a certain point, and then it's painful, and then that's where you would stop.
Yeah, and then when I sleep, I always sleep on the right side, and all night I'm like struggling with the pain.
Yeah. Yeah. So part of it's the neck, part of it's your thoracic. And it can actually be other parts of the body too, which is why I advocate yoga, because you're using your whole body to help yourself out.
Yeah.
So, well, I hope that feels better soon.
Thank you.
Hey, Todd, I have a quick question, and it kind of
Sure.
relates to what Deepthi was saying.
Mhm.
And it's a little bit off topic, but what is your feeling on like creams like BioFreeze, or those kinds of things? I know we're talking about like muscles and bones, and these are
Mhm.
like topical, but
Yeah.
do you feel like those are helpful or not?
Yeah, they fall under the category if you spend the money on it. Before you spend money on things, whenever people ask me these type of questions, whether it's for some type of bracing or a device or whatever, I always say, before you spend the money, think, if you spend that much money and it doesn't work to your satisfaction, will you be upset that you spent that money and it didn't work? And if you're going to be upset, if it's like $500 for a bottle of whatever you're going to slather all over you, and you'll be like, well, no, I'll be upset if I pay $500 and it doesn't work. Then you might not want to buy it. And the reason why I say that is because it is so variable in what works and what doesn't, that it's, even though the salespeople for those products are going to tell you that they work and they've tested and that they're so much better, it really is personal. And
Okay,
so,
that's helpful.
yeah, so it's once again too, you have to look at the ingredients and that you're comfortable with the ingredients, because I knew a guy, his brother was, I know a PT, and his brother is not a PT, but he got involved with a company that was trying to produce the same type of product as BioFreeze, like you said. And one of their marketing things was to say that BioFreeze has a lot of harmful ingredients in them that aren't natural, and ours is more natural and won't harm you. You follow what I'm saying? And
Yeah.
so that's another thing you got to pay attention to is, what your skin is your biggest organ, and you want to be really be careful on what you're absorbing into your body.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. The next one down, that's the last one let's see. What was the last one I pointed out? The biceps. And then the next one down is that transversus abdominis, which I referred to earlier, and the external oblique. And so what they mean there is they cut out that section of that oblique so that you could see underneath it to the internal oblique and the transversus. And then the next one down is the iliopsoas. And so, which is really two muscles. It's, I think we touched on this some last time. It's the iliacus and the psoas. And because they insert in the same area, they'll refer to it as the same muscle as one muscle, the iliopsoas. So once again, it has the O in there. So it's that first O is a connecting. So the iliacus, ilio, and then psoas. So my model I have here that I had last week, remember I was saying the different colors of the spine indicate the different segments of the spine. And this one, so this is this side of the screen is the anterior front side of the body. This is the posterior side. And on this right side, they have these muscles. And so this muscle here is the psoas muscle, and it attaches up here where it's blue, which is the lumbar, and it attaches to these lumbar segments, crosses through the pelvis, and comes down and attaches to the femur, the inside of the femur. And so that's a real important muscle. And that's the psoas portion of the iliopsoas. The iliacus portion is right next to it here. So if you look at this as a bowl, it is lining the bowl on the within the pelvis.
Todd, is that psoas coming in the front or the back?
It is attached to the spine, and it's attached to the bony parts that stick out to the sides, which we call the transverse processes. So if I look here, you can see how, let's see, this sticks straight back and then this sticks out. This one, the lumbar is kind of hard to see here. This comes off to the out to the side, and this goes out to the right side. That's the transverse process. So you have the right transverse process and the left. So this psoas is attached to the bodies and the transverse processes of the lumbar spine. So it's more front and side.
It's in the front or back?
It is both the front and the side of the spine.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. It can be a complicated muscle. So because it can pull the spine into flexion, that bending forward, but it can also pull these lumbar segments into extension. So it depends on how you are positioned and how you use your body and your muscles. So it can be pretty tricky. But like I said, it's a real important one. And like I said, the iliacus is lining the inside of the pelvic bowl. It runs, comes down and runs next to the psoas and attaches to the inside of the femur.
We're no longer referencing this page for that, is that right?
I'm sorry, say that again?
I said, I don't see the iliacus, we're not referencing the page on this, right?
I'm still on page 24. It's iliopsoas.
Oh, right, because they're two different things.
Yeah, so I
Iliacus and the psoas are two different things.
yeah, it's commonly referred to as the iliopsoas.
Yeah.
But and that's okay to conceptualize it that way, but really it's advanced anatomy people really, they'll argue about, they're into all this stuff, so they'll argue about things. And that's one of the arguments, is it, should it be referred to as iliopsoas or two separate muscles? So I'll teach it both ways. I especially make the distinction. The next one down I'll refer to as the adductor longus. It's part of the adductor group, so it's on that inner thigh. It's the adductor bringing it towards the midline. This is their function. On the other side, they had the gracilis. It goes straight up the inner thigh. The next one on the list is the sartorius, and it kind of comes up and goes in an angle, which you can't see in this picture. Or yeah, you can. You can see how it angles. And that has to, there's, I forget the exact phrasing, but it's sartorius is something like the tailor's muscle, because a tailor would sit in cross-legged. And so that muscle pulls you up into that position. So if you would sit with your legs out in front of you and then slide your foot up the inner thigh, and so your knee is dropping out, that's one of the muscles doing that is the sartorius. So if you were sitting in an L position and you wanted to cross your legs, because you're bringing the foot up and turning the knee out, the hip out, that's the sartorius muscle that's doing that, bringing you to that cross-legged position. What is it? Crisscrossed applesauce? Is that how they say to sit now? Next one down is the adductor magnus. Once again, that's part of that adductor group. The inner thigh muscles. The vastus medialis we covered. That's then that inner quad muscle. And then the next one down is the gastrocnemius, and a lot of people have wide enough gastrocnemius or just shortened up as gastroc, that you can see it from the front but really it's mainly on the backside. Going to page 25, the going down that left side of the page, there's the deltoid, which we'd already covered. You have your anterior, middle, and your posterior. So this is really a good view of the posterior deltoid, as well as you can see some of the middle deltoid. This is another view of the latissimus dorsi. I would think that it actually attaches further up on the spine, but they have it drawn lower. So like I said, you can see the teres major and minor. Since what I'll make this to simplify the forearm. It says flexor carpi ulnaris. So flexor means it's going to flex something. The direction is flexion versus extending. So carpi means it attaches to the carpal bones, and ulnaris means it's on the ulna side of the forearm. But that's that group of muscles there, just like I said, like the adductor magnus, and then I'm just like, well, that's part of the adductor group. Well, this is the flexor group in the forearm. It's more on this inner part of the forearm. And then there's the outer part of the forearm is more of the extensor group. And so if you're going to stretch those muscles, then you would need to know which direction you're going to go. Working our way down. Next is the gluteus medius. If you and then the next one after that is the gluteus maximus. So the maximus is more superficial. So once again, if I was taking my finger and poking, so it would be layered through here. So the outermost layer is the bigger muscle, the glute max. And not only are they layered this way, like I said, with the abdominal muscles, like poking in, like what are you going to poke first and then deeper as you go. They're also different fans. So if you look at that glute max, it's kind of fanned this way.
Yeah.
But if you watch my hand here as I move it, if I go forward and if I go anterior and I'm here, then that's and deeper, that's glute medius. And then if I go even further, that's glute minimus. And it's further forward and it's deeper. Does that make sense? Excuse me. So on this model, this is, once again, this is anterior. We're going to look at the posterior. This is the right side. Glute max isn't even here, but they cut the glute medius so you can see the muscles below the glute medius. And actually, when you get further up here, where my finger is anteriorly here, it's even smaller is the glute minimus.
And that's not even shown. That's not that.
Right. Yeah, it's not in the
Okay.
yeah. So like I said, this is simplified, and it's probably in the Ray Long book for when we get to there, or if you're flipping through those simultaneously. But they didn't cut away the butt here, so on both sides it is the glute max, and because of that angling, that fanning, then you can see the top edge of the glute medius, and both of those are labeled. But as you saw on the other parts, well, I guess on this side of the picture, they didn't cut anything away, but on the other side, when they looked at the front of the body, they were cutting things away so you could see what was deeper. And they didn't do that here for some reason, just to keep it simple. So that's the glute muscles. So glute, like I said, glute minimus, glute medius, and glute maximus. So that falls under that thought. Well, if there's a maximus, there must be something smaller. So it's a medius, and since there's a medius, there must be a minimus.
I feel like that cramps a lot,
Pardon me?
the medius.
Yeah.
Like in certain poses, I feel like that cramps a lot.
Yeah, you can potentially that, and the depends on if it's a medius, minimus, or the IT band, depending on, yeah, but that's common.
Yes.
Next down is the iliotibial band, that IT band that we covered before. I was saying the TFL inserted into the IT band. Well, parts of the glute insert into the IT band, but it's not exclusive. It also will insert into the femur. Unlike the TFL, it inserts only into the IT band. They once again labeled gracilis. That's one of the inner thigh muscles. Going down the other side, it's reviewing that sternocleidomastoid, because you can see the mastoid part of the skull that traps the trapezius, and they're simplifying it as just the trapezius, but really they're pointing right where the upper trap and the middle trap meet is where they're pointing to. And then if you go directly below that, that's the I don't know if you can tell where my finger is here, where it's going up and down, but it's just barely angled. That's the lower trap. And just like with the deltoids, I said the deltoid, you need an anterior deltoid will take you forward into flexion, posterior deltoid will take you back into extension, middle deltoid will abduct you. All of those are different motions, but they're all deltoids. And it's the same thing with the upper trap. The upper trap, it's that you get this shrugging with the upper trap. Middle trap helps you with that rowing motion of bringing your shoulder back, shoulder blade back. And then if you've ever had people prone, lying on their belly, and you're in a Superman position and you raise your arms up, that's the lower traps. So see how, even though it's all the trapezius, the different parts of it do different things. The teres minor. There's other things on here there are things on here there are things that aren't on here that are important, and we'll get into them later because they'll show up elsewhere. But the rotator cuff muscles, 4 muscles, rotator cuff, and I'm emphasizing rotator cuff because you'll get people say, I hurt my rotator cuff. They'll say like a drinking cup. It's like, and you just smile and nod, but it's rotator cuff. And they are small muscles. So what you do is you take your one hand and use your fingers and put them on the side and front of your shoulder. And in that area here, more on the side, is underneath the deltoid, is where the 4 rotator cuff muscles attach. So it's the well, I'm sorry, the 3. You take 3 fingers. The 4th one is close, but it's not the same area. And the 4 muscles are the supraspinatus, the infraspinatus. So supra is S-U-P-R-A, supraspinatus.
And we just know how to spell spinatus, so we're good.
Yeah.
No, we don't.
S-P-I-N-A-T-U-S.
Okay.
Yeah. So once again, if there's a supra, there's an infra. So supra is above, infra is below the spine of the scapula. So that's back here. So once again, if you take your hand and reach back on the backside of your shoulder blade. You can, the upper part is meaty, and then you slide your fingers back and there's a bony part that sticks out. That's the spine of the scapula. You slide down further and it's meaty again. That's below the spine. That's the infraspinatus. So supraspinatus, infraspinatus. Actually, let me back up a second. A way to remember the 4 is sits, S-I-T-S, sits, S-I-T-S. And it's supraspinatus, infraspinatus, teres minor. And that's what prompted this, is because it's on our drawing here that we're looking at. And then the last S, because it's S-I-T-S, is subscapularis, and that's S-U-B-S-C-A-P-U-L-A-R-I-S, subscapularis. Scapularis is the scapula, which is the shoulder blade.
Why isn't the teres major part of it?
Because it does not attach in that same area. When you take your 3 fingers and put it on the back outer side of your humerus, it doesn't do this exact same things as those muscles do. And so the way they all come together, it's in reference to a cuff. It's holding it together. And the way the bones work is that the ball and socket joint, the ball needs to stay in the socket joint. And so those rotator cuff muscles are small muscles that hold that ball in there, so it spins where it's supposed to be, and it doesn't roll up. So because if you roll up, then you're going to jam things up and have problems.
So it's holding the shoulder ball in its joint?
Yeah, it's stable. It's stabilizing the shoulder. So there's a little shelf on the shoulder blade, and so that it's above the ball and socket. So if I hold my hands like this, then above it is the shelf, which is the acromion. If it rolls up, then the bones are going to pinch together, and you don't want that to happen, because in that space where my thumb is where those tendons are for the rotator cuff. So if it rolls up, it's going to smash those tendons, and then you're going to have an injury. And so Deep, that's what could possibly what happened to you, is the way you were using your shoulder, you could be straining that muscle.
So then something happened, and then from there on, everything started. The whole year I saw acupuncture, I went to chiropractor, but I didn't take X-ray. So now I'm considering maybe I should take an X-ray or MRI.
Sorry, take what?
X-ray.
Yeah, well, actually, can you take your arm and just bend your elbow like this? Not out to the side in abduction, but just halfway between. Not flexion, but halfway in between. There you go. And not there, not abduction, right there. And then drop your elbow down and then raise it all the way up. Does that bother you?
Not so much.
Okay. So then an X-ray, they might start with an X-ray, but it's not really, an X-ray will show, can potentially show a rotator cuff problem, because that,
like slight pinch when I do that. Now I can notice that.
yeah.
Slight, yeah.
Yeah.
Like a pinch
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah. It's a good, easy way to get started to try to figure out what's wrong, but it's, I don't know how much it's really going to show at this point.
Oh,
I gave the MRI
oh, okay.
to really pinpoint it.
So then,
Well, my chiropractor has been cracking my neck to release the nerve.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, there's a neck part of it too, but is he doing the rest of the spine?
Yes, just he does something with this, aligning my spine.
Mhm.
He does that with everyone, I guess.
Well, I'm sorry, what was that?
I guess he does that with everyone.
Oh, yeah,
No problem.
Right, I noticed.
He starts with the spine and then he uses some massager,
right.
he pushes this way,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then he cracks my neck. And
Yeah.
then I have a release that week. And then again it starts. So the whole year I was seeing him. And then I was feeling better, in fact. And then again it started last week. And my last time I mentioned.
Yeah, you have that problem as well, yeah.
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 It's like all over the body now.
Yeah. Yeah, so obviously there's more some soft tissue issue that's like the rotator cuff might not be working properly, and it might not be working properly, but not only because of the neck issue, but because of the thoracic and rib issues. And so you have to address what needs to be done, and apparently that hasn't been addressed fully because it keeps coming back.
Yeah. So I guess I have to take an X-ray, right, or MRI?
Whatever if you go to your primary care doctor,
Yeah.
whatever, and it's a good, easy, quick way to see
I
what's
already
going
saw
on.
orthopedic. They just said it's they asked me to take a steroid.
Uh,
They said it's just a nerve pinch.
uh,
Yeah,
okay. Yeah, well, hopefully get that resolved soon.
yeah.
So working our way down, we have the teres minor, and that was part of the rotator cuff, as I explained. Teres major is lying next to the teres minor, but it attaches differently. Next down is the triceps brachii, which we covered already. It's on the backside. It has 3 heads to it, 3 parts to it, which is why it's triceps. So then the extent in the forearm is the extensor group, which would include a bunch of different muscles. And so they're listed here: extensor carpi radialis longus, extensor digitorum, extensor carpi radialis brevis, extensor carpi ulnaris. Those are primarily on that lateral outer part of the forearm. That's the part of the elbow where you get tennis elbows, on the outer part. So if you put your hand on your humerus and slide it down, and you can feel where the bone flares out. And so where that flaring out, that's where you get your tennis elbow. And then if you would do the same thing on the inner part, this is where you get golfer's elbow. So you get some tendonitis. Because you'll hear people talk about they have tennis elbow, and that'll affect your ability to be able to do chaturanga and different positioning. And then we'll just run through these again. So the adductor magnus, once again, is part of the adductors. Semimembranosus is part of the hamstrings. Biceps femoris is part of the hamstrings. Semitendinosus is part of the hamstrings. The gastrocnemius is the calf muscles. They form the Achilles tendon. And then the soleus lies underneath the gastrocnemius. So remember I talked about the abdominals, where you're going in and its depth. Well, the soleus is I'll use my little guy here because it might be easier to see. So if this is his leg, this is his foot, this is the front side. So the muscle close to the bone is the soleus, and over top of that is the gastroc.
This one's good.
That's
He
a
has a
backpack.
Chinese skeleton.
Just a very small
He's a
skeleton.
child, he's a child in the adult, like just child clothes.
Yeah,
Aw.
little pygmy. So All right, so I tried to not only just point out what muscles are there, but I tried to point out some function and direction, because went over a little plane, started to introduce some plane of motion, so that abduction going out to the side, the adduction coming in. So we covered a bunch of different things, but the main thing was to just narrow down some of the muscles. So we'll take a 5-minute break. Okay. And then we're gonna, the printout from last week. It's the one, I don't have mine handy, but we'll go over that.
A printout from last
Yeah,
week.
it's the handout. It was the handout that Kate,
Okay.
the handout that Kate posted last week.
Looks like it. Anatomy PDF. Okay.
All right. And I think I see Tracy's foot still there. Tracy, can you help me out and hit a pause for the,
Sure.
I don't think we need to record the break, but then we'll all have to remember to hit start again when we come back in 5 minutes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Does somebody have the does someone there have the printout for the handout that she posted last week?
Last week.
Yeah.
Yeah, anatomy of trunk and spine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is this an anatomy of trunk and spine number 2?
Yes.
Okay.
For today. Is that what it's called?
At the top, it says student copy from student manual.
Yes,
Yeah.
Okay.
that's it. All right.
Got it. I don't know. Not asking questions. I got 12 minutes.
What's
Let's
the
go.
limit?
Objectives are ready.
So
So,
what I do here is I ask, we'll go around and someone's going to read.
okay.
So in the classroom, who wants to read first?
I will. What do you want me to read?
Regional anatomy method for studying anatomy of movement and the all the bullet points there.
Yours looks different. Oh, no, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't.
Sorry. It depends on.
Okay, method for studying anatomy of movement. Divide the body into main regions: trunk, upper extremity, lower extremity. Develop an external orientation to the region. Use touch, a mirror, and a book to locate landmarks. Identify the key movements in that region: flexion, extension, side bending, rotation, abduction, adduction, internal and external rotation. Name the bones and joints of the region, including the nature of the joints: ball and socket, gliding, hinge, and pivot. Name the muscles and identify their origins and insertions. Determine the relationships between the muscles and the movements. Identify problems in the area.
Okay, good. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Now, what's helpful about having everybody read for a little bit is that you might get tripped up on some words that you don't know. So it'll give you the opportunity to try to actually vocalize them. And if, it'll help you get the feel for the language by reading it yourself. And then what I do is I go back through and say, and really we've done a lot of this already. So I was saying use your hand and reach and touch this part of your body, feel for this and that. Last time I mentioned some books that you might want to look at, including the ones that you're required to have. And of course the internet. And so the key movements are basically these, and we've mentioned all of these. And there's points where we're going to get into in more detail, but this is, we've touched on all of these already. The flexion, that F forward, the movement is forward into flexion. Extension is the opposite of that, leaning back. Side bending, so side bending would be identified to which direction are you going? Are you side bending to, I'm side bending to my right, and then they're side bending to the left. Same thing with the rotation. As I turn my head to the right is this direction, and there's left rotation. The abduction, we talked about, that's for both the arms and the legs, the extremities. The abduction is if a child is abducted, it is taken away. So it's away from the midline, abducted. Adduction, add means towards, add to. So that's moving towards the midline. Internal and external rotation. What I didn't mention earlier, when I pointed that out and I put my my arm in this position, I flex my elbow to 90 degrees. And if I'm facing you, internal and external rotation is named by what the front of the bone is doing. So my finger here is on the front of the humerus, and that front of the humerus is going out. It's going lateral. So it is external rotation. And external rotation is the same as lateral rotation. So we're naming it by what the front of the bone is doing. So likewise, if I go in, the front of the bone is going towards the body, it's going in, so that's internal rotation, or it's medial rotation. The same thing. So remember that vastus medialis was on the medial inside portion of the thigh. So it's that same thing with the consistency with that naming. We started to introduce some of the names of the muscles and touched on the idea that there's what they call origin and insertions. Origin is where it starts, insertion is where it ends. So my biceps originates up here at the shoulder, and it inserts down around the elbow. So when that muscle gets shorter, it creates this action. That action is known as flexion. Likewise, if I was doing dolphin, where I was on my forearms and I was using my biceps to pull my shoulder forward, then this is more advanced, but in that case, the origin would be referenced as the elbow portion and inserting at the shoulder. As far as action goes, but in general, we'll say the primary action that we know that the muscle does will refer to the shoulder as being the origin and the elbow area being the insertion. So we try to describe some of the muscles and how they move, and then we talked a little bit about problem areas. So who wants to read next?
Okay, I'm next.
Okay. Read through that whole next section down to muscle groups for me, please.
Introduction. The spine is an important structure in the body. It allows for torso movements, houses the spinal cord, which is the connector between the brain and the body, and is a focus for chronic and energetic flow. Vertebral column includes 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 1 sacrum, which is 5 fused bones, 1 coccyx, which is 3 to 4 fused bones. Curvature of the spine. Normal is a slight S shape. Kyphosis is exaggeration of thoracic curve. Lordosis, exaggeration of lumbar curve. Scoliosis, lateral curves. Vertebral structure, vertebral canal. Foramina,
I'm gonna stop you there. Foramina.
Okay. Should I keep going?
Yes.
Intervertebral discs, ligaments. Pelvic girdle includes ilium, ischium,
Yes.
and pubis.
Mm-hmm.
acetabulum.
Okay, you've done wonderful so far. You got tripped up on that one, which is easy to do. Acetabulum.
Okay, acetabulum. Hip
Yes.
socket.
Mhm.
Pelvic inlet and pelvic outlet, sacrum. Rib cage includes true ribs, 1st through 7th, false ribs, 8th through 10th, floating ribs, 11th and 12th.
Yes. Okay, good. Thank you very much. So we went over that breakfast, lunch, and dinner for the vertebral column. The on my model here, up here, the purple does not have ribs. That's cervical. There's 7 of them, 7 different bones. In between each bone is a intervertebral disc. The thoracic, there's 12 individual bones. Once again, there's discs between each one. The blue area is the lumbar area. There's 5 of them. The lumbar does not have ribs. The thoracic area is the only place that has ribs. Sacrum is fused. You can sometimes it's easier to see it from the front as a bone because they put this rubber ligaments over top of it. There's a bunch of them there. This is 5 fused bones. So since their bones are fused together, there are no discs within the sacrum because it's all fused. And then my model has lost its coccyx. It doesn't have the tailbone. So that would be the 3 to 4 different segments. So, right, so the number 7, 12, and 5, you eat breakfast at 7 in the morning, have lunch at 12 noon, and dinner at 5 o'clock. So that's how we remember the numbers, how many bones there are in each section. The curve of the spine. So they'll refer to as normal kyphosis. Sometimes people will say the kyphosis is an exaggeration, like they're saying here, as we covered last time. So if it's kyphosis and lordosis is exaggerated, then it's kind of pathological, right? But you can have normal kyphosis and normal lordosis. But scoliosis is not normal. It's strictly pathological. And so where there's 2 forms of scoliosis. One is structural, where the bones are actually deformed, that's causing the bend. Other is what we call functional scoliosis, and that's where the muscles are tight and they are pulling you into the curvature. And so most people know at least one person with scoliosis where if it's real bad and you see them from behind, you can see like a rib hump on one side. And that's some people have it and it's not that bad and they don't have much pain. Other people, it's a problem. So I'll stop there because our time has come to an end. And any questions?
Good review.
All right, good. Yeah, it's
Makes me feel like I know a little bit.
yeah, yeah, and unfortunately, if you don't use it, you lose it. So this is why I'm trying to touch on a bunch of little things, and I'll stop and explain things as you don't understand them, but then we'll keep revisiting them over and over in different ways, hopefully, to keep your interest. Always trying to apply things functionally.
Yeah, no more. Like, are we supposed to be reading or referencing? Or are we good to just look at this in January? Which is what I'll probably do, but for the sake of anybody who's gonna do homework, I'm asking for them.
Well,
If I'm being totally honest.
the more time you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. The more you'll get out of our sessions is if you look over the handouts beforehand. So there isn't anything essential where it's that you have to read anything, but the handouts that are posted on the Google Classroom.
Today.
Yeah,
We didn't get them till today.
Pardon me?
We didn't get them till today, and like, we're working. and
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, that's all right, because my intention was to go over that that generic muscles that we did, and also to go over the handout that we went over the same information in the handout that we're going over now, last week, but this time it's in print, and it's, once again, it's a review. Any other questions?
Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, it was great. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, guys.
Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to everybody.
Same to you. Feel better,
Thank
Evie.
you.
Safe
Thanks.
travels, everybody. Bye.
Happy holidays.
You too.
Bye, Meg. Bye, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Someone's gonna help out by hitting
I'm gonna stop.
stop the recording,
Yep.
So we are not coming
and
back
you
next
can stop the meeting.